My guest today is filmmaker Jack Howard, and he was part of a comedy duo, Jack and Dean, on YouTube, a venture that garnered over 73 million views. The highlight of this collaboration was the production of 2 seasons of Jack and Dean of All Trades, co-starring BAFTA winner Jessica Hynes, and earning acclaim with a Best Series award. He also directed the Beko Inheritance for Beko, which won a Cannes Lion, and he also directed across 5 episodes of Series 3 of Andy and the Band for CBBC. And then in 2021, Jack directed East Mode for Comedy Central, and even his short film Emotional Baggage was a finalist at the LOCO Film Festival. But Jack is here today to talk about his incredible short film, The Second Time Around, one of the most cinematic works of art of short film I have ever seen. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Jack Howard and his newest short film, The Second Time Around, to the show. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you so much. What an intro. When you say everything I've ever done in that order compressed, it sounds quite good.
And I had to leave some things out. So tell me, what inspired the story behind The Second Time Around?
um, to be honest, it's kind of hard to remember what the inception of it all was. I am just a huge cinema nerd, and I think part of the joy of creating this film for me was thinking about a story that would play with audiences' expectations. So you'd go into it thinking it could be one thing and then leave it hopefully thinking something completely different. And so I liked the idea of coming up with a story that would give an audience that experience.
You did. I didn't see, I'm not going to call it a twist, but I
Yeah, this is
did.
it, isn't it? Like it's something I was when I originally thought about it, there was a few different things I thought about in terms of what the kind of the reveal in the story was, and the word that feels right for me now is that it sort of dawns on you. It's a dawning.
That is a perfect word because I've watched this film so much that I'm left with the same feeling of absolute awe every time I watch it. And like you said, it's that dawning, it's that slow reveal that happens, and the audience, it's not a shocking thing. You're just like, oh, and then you're trying to grasp your own emotion of the moment. And I think that's what the beauty of this film is. And for me, I mean, when I watched it the first time,
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh. So when I watched it the second time, I was like, oh my gosh. And this is the type of film I cannot wait for people to see in the theater because the experience is going to be absolutely almost for me undescribable because when I watch the film I'm sitting here going, how am I going to write this interview up because
Hmm.
it boggles the mind. But you have told one of the greatest love stories ever on film in 12 minutes. I mean, your writing of the story and putting it on film is a lesson to every filmmaker out there. And I say, ladies and gentlemen, and if you're an up and coming filmmaker, maybe you're a seasoned filmmaker, this is how it's done. So, Jack, when you watch it in its complete form, what comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, firstly, I just want to say thank you for saying all of that. And you have to understand how overwhelming that is to hear, especially because this is something that existed in my head for longer than it's been a real thing. Like it's taken me a while to actually make it something that isn't just something I bore people about when they're willing to listen to me sort of trying to explain my idea and wondering like, oh, does this work? Does this work? So to be honest with you now, when I watch it, it's like I'm a chef who can't taste the recipe anymore. Like I know what ingredients I used and I know what I was aiming to do. So when I watch it now, I'm just seeing almost like all of the cuts and all the little things that I'm seeing the details and almost the technical side of it rather than experiencing it anymore. And the last time I was able to actually feel like I could experience it was when we saw it at a screening that we hosted for like the cast and crew and family and friends, where I did see it in the cinema, and that felt like it was different because it's the thing that everyone always says about the theatrical experience. It changes the way that movies feel for a plethora of reasons. And for me, watching my own work in that environment amplified that feeling. I was like, oh, what, the film is different in here. There's something about it. There's something about this room and this atmosphere that's making this sort of, it's giving it something extra. But yeah, I am just so pleased that you emotionally resonated with it. And yeah, it's difficult for us to talk about it, obviously, because kind of I think the joy of the film is why I can't really ever tell people what it's about, other than saying, "Oh, a woman turns up at a cafe and this waitress doesn't know who she is," and like it's kind of a bad elevator pitch. But I
Oh,
think
yeah.
the
Oh,
joy of it is as it unfolds, you kind of figure out what's going on.
I can wholeheartedly agree because, like I said, when I watch this film, I sit and I'm like, how am I going to write about this? This film, and I have never said these words about any film I've ever seen. This film is the perfect description of a cinematic outer body experience. Because, like you said, you can't go walk up to somebody who loves film too and explain this film. They have to see it for themselves. And then when it's over, it's the only way to talk to them and say, okay, what did you think? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not like going to somebody and explaining, hey, I saw Superman or I saw Batman. When you see the second time around, you can't explain it in words. And that's why this film is on a whole nother level.
I appreciate that, and I'm also just happy to hear as well that you have gone back to it multiple times as well. That's a genuinely like an honor to hear that you've done that, because it was a film that I built to be rewatched, and I didn't think that I didn't know how often that would happen, but I certainly wanted people, if they wanted to revisit it and maybe feel how it does change the experience the second time around.
Well, okay. The reason I had to go back multiple times, not only because I enjoyed it so much, there's the little hints within the
Hmm.
film that are so subtle that most people may not realize it even at the end. Then they're going to think, oh, wait a minute. Then I feel that's the only thing I feel sorry for people sitting in the theater, because they're not going to be able to yell up to the film guy and go, hey, could you play this over again? Yeah, because there's these little hints that that puts all the pieces together, so you have to watch it really closely. And I think that's the reason why, like you said, this is a film that's kind of hard to explain to people.
Yeah, and I do think as well that when I was writing it, I was really conscious of, and I think I really appreciate that we're both being quite sensitive about what details we're giving away. But I was very sensitive about the idea of, I don't want this to be like clever, clever. I don't want it to be, oh, that was a really clever decision. That was a very smart film. I wanted it to be leading with its heart and with its emotion and with its story and with its characters. But I needed to understand all of those elements. And I'm also like a big like genre fan, let's just put it that way. And so I was really enjoying all those details, but I knew that really, in order to get people, especially in 12 minutes, especially in a short film, to get people to emotionally respond to something, to actually care about what you've made, they need to have an emotional reaction to what's going on. And so that's why I really emphasize that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of, we've all had those films where we loved them so much that you can't go tell a friend about it because then you give it away.
Hmm.
And but this film is far more, I don't want to use the word complex. It's just that people have to truly sit down, focus, and watch this, because they're going to see something they've never experienced before. But part of that is the fact that I love the contrast between the two actresses. You had Caroline Goodall and Hannah Onslow. When you were casting for the two roles, were you looking for a particular contrast in mind?
Well, I'd love to know what you mean about that particular contrast. What I knew that I wanted with these two actors were like I come from as you mentioned in my intro, a world of YouTube kind of filmmaking and sketch comedy, and so I've always kind of made my own shorts. And with this specifically, when I came up with this idea, I was like, I don't want it to feel like something I could have just made 5 years ago. I could have easily made this on a smaller budget, and it's not like we had a particularly large budget, but I could have done it smaller. I could have sacrificed things like the atmosphere of the rain. I probably could have set it during the day rather than at night. But I think all those things were really important to me, as was casting two actors. One who's at like the very beginning of her career. She's I'm certain that she's going to become a star. She's so talented. She's so brilliant. That's Hannah Onslow. And then with Caroline Goodall, I luckily had met Caroline a few years ago randomly, and I was a big fan of Hook, and I was on the same show as her, and she was just so generous with her time and was letting me ask all the questions I had about Steven Spielberg and Robin Williams. Like, she was just lovely. And then when I was casting this, I was like, I really want a seasoned actor. Like, I really can't have this just be just someone I try and find on some, I don't know, like casting website or something. It needs to be somebody who's like really seasoned and really brilliant. And luckily, when Caroline read it, she wanted to do it, and so she joined us. So for me, that was what was really important. I wanted two very like different points in their career, but like clearly like established actors, not just somebody that I knew already who I could call up and be like, "Do you want to come do this for 2 days?"
Oh, see, when I say contrast, one's older, one's younger.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was looking at the close-ups, I kept thinking in my mind, okay, if the actresses were different in
Mm-hmm.
look, would it still have the same message? And I don't
That's
think it would,
interesting.
because Hannah, the red hair played perfectly because
Mm-hmm.
physically it was a great contrast to Caroline. And it had also played very, very well with the lighting because of the fact is if Hannah was blonde, it wouldn't have worked. If she was brunette, it wouldn't have worked at all because of the way the lighting and the shadowing was set up for that close up. And when I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, red really works here.
It really does, doesn't it? And that's not something that I like. That was just something that was offered to me, and therefore it's kind of built around the fact that she just had red hair. But I agree with you. There's something weirdly, this is going to be such a weird sentence, weirdly cinematic about red hair. I don't know what it is, but it just looks really good on camera.
It does. It does. But it's the shots of them sitting at the cafe table facing one another. And that's when I'm looking, I'm like, you couldn't have casted this more perfectly than you did because it just worked because of the fact the situation of the lighting and the shadowing from the cinematography. It's it's part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yes.
directly, but it's there. And nothing in this film is forced. It's a very slow dance between two people, and everything about this film is subtle, it's powerful, but it's still delicate. I mean, was the magic planned or did it just happen?
Um, I'm I'm sure that there is some stuff in it that just happened, especially with the performances, because I know for sure that with Caroline's character specifically, there was stuff that I hadn't even realized about her, who she is as a person, that when I'd written it, I didn't see it. And when I saw her saying words, I was like, oh my God, she's this kind of person. It wasn't until she was bringing it to life that I could really understand who this person was that I'd written, and, recognize myself in that, and my family, and just see where I'd kind of pulled from as she was doing it. But in terms of the cinema kind of language of it all, that was very, very well considered. Me and my director of photography, Kieran O'Brien, we looked at a lot of horror references, and we wanted this to feel like it was unsafe, especially at the beginning. So at the start of the film, there's this kind of like long tracking shot through the rain, and sort of it turns out to basically be a point of view shot, which is for me reminiscent and inspired by the first Halloween film, that first ever Steadicam shot, I believe, that goes towards the house at the beginning. That's the point of view of a serial killer, and then like being behind glass and how to shoot someone through that is very like Silence of the Lambs. And even those big wide lenses that we use, we were inspired by a more recent horror film from last year, actually, called Longlegs, and we used actually the same camera and the same lenses as them because I wanted to create this like weird off kilter unsafe feeling. And even just the interaction they have at the beginning when she's, you know, at the door and asking to come inside the cafe, that's kind of vampiric in its undertones. So I really wanted that to feel dangerous, and using almost like tropes of horror in order to sort of, what I wanted really was a curiosity from an audience, or a sort of leaning in of, who is this woman? What does she want? What is this? Like that kind of, those kind of questions. If anything like that is happening in the first few minutes of the film, then I'm very pleased to have achieved that effect.
Well, you did, and that's what I felt at the very beginning of the film, and then you notice this slight turn of the emotion of the film. Instead of having that feeling of uncertainty, why is this woman showing up in the rain? Why in the world is she standing in the rain? And but it's when Caroline she's standing and she's looking at that board that barely has some photographs on it, and it's her dialogue that changes the tone as to where this is possibly going to lead. But it still gives no sign to the audience as to what this is all about. And
Yeah,
so, and of course, there's that one little line where she's looking at the board and it kind of makes you laugh. So automatically your guard is dropped.
exactly. And I think that was something I really wanted to carry over from sketch comedy days, was that actually the sort of the latter half of my sketch comedy career, if you can call it that, I started to blend in more serious sort of undertones or themes into the comedy, because I was like, well, people aren't going to expect, they're going to expect a big punchline, but they won't expect you to leave them in a place of like, oh, I wasn't, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't prepared for that kind of emotional punch. And the same thing here, but in reverse, that I was like, I don't want this to just be, I'm so conscious as well of like all short films are, about deep, sad subjects. That seems to be like the trope of short films. And I was like, I don't want to make one like that. I want it to be sort of dancing along the surface, and making sure that it's not, making light of a very serious situation and a very serious topic, which is, it is about, underneath all of it, it is kind of about some stuff like that. But I wanted to make sure that it wasn't sort of going, that it didn't feel like I was like slamming my fist down and going, isn't this deep and important? I wanted to make sure that the characters could be funny, and that you're right, that there's something about comedy and that kind of warmness that she has, and she's a bit off kilter the whole time anyway, but that kind of thing, it allows you to understand, I think, as you're watching it, like maybe we're safe with this person.
Yes, and you lead us into that, and we're not going to bring up the elements because you hear it in the dialogue, and that's and I think that's part of what captured me, because it's both of what she said, but more importantly, it's how she said it. The thing about Caroline Goodall in this film, her pacing of the dialogue, you're hanging on every word because you're looking at this woman as she's mature. She probably has stories to tell, but then she kind of out of the blue going to tell us one.
Hmm.
And so we're listening, we're focused upon her. So when I was looking at the film, did you film the scenes in order?
Um, well, I tried to as much as possible because I knew that it would be a good thing for the actors in a sort of meta way to be kind of feeling more comfortable as the film is also kind of going on. So at the beginning, if it is a bit more awkward and the actors hadn't developed a rapport with each other yet, that would be okay. And then by the end of the film, when they are a little bit more connected, so would Caroline and Hannah be more connected. Unfortunately, filmmaking is not always perfect, and so when we were shooting on the first night, which is maybe one of the worst experiences I've ever had on set with things going wrong, that we had, a crew member had to leave with health problems. The rain machine, which is, as you know, very important to the film and the atmosphere, broke, and we couldn't fix it, and so we just had to quite quickly make decisions on, okay, what do we shoot now, and how do we approach that. And I could have in that moment shot half of a scene one way and then shot the other half of the scene another night, and I was like, I do not want to do that to them. That would be awful to have to come back and do that. So instead, what we did is basically compressed what was supposed to be a quite, achievable 3-day shoot into a basically 2.5 night shoot. So we lost quite a lot of time with that. But I do also just want to respond to what you were saying about Caroline's performance and how you were hanging on every word. That's what I mean by how lucky I was to be able to get her, and why it was important to have such a seasoned actor do this, because I knew that if you read this script, just the black and white words on the page, there's a chance you could misinterpret or miss the point of what was being said, because actually quite a lot of it is, I don't want to,
No, no, no.
insult
There,
my own writing, but it's quite mundane things that they're saying to each other sometimes. There's quite a lot of
yes,
like,
but there are lines of dialogue that is leading and eluding.
yes, exactly. So I knew that an actor like Caroline would be able to play all of the sort of the subtext of that. And believe me, she had lots of questions and she went down lots of rabbit holes in a way that I'm not making fun. I mean that in the best way. As a director and as someone who'd written this and had lived with it, to have somebody also come to me and then have such enthusiasm and such questions and such ideas for what her character could be, where she could have come from before this, and what she thinks and believes in moment to moment, all of that was a joy. And I only wish we had longer, because after 3 days you've kind of got your rhythm going, and then you finished that you're going to have to stop and go and edit the film.
Yeah, I love the framing of the shots of each woman's while sitting at the cafe table.
Hmm.
The close-ups cause the audience to hear every word spoken. And and I really focus even when Hannah would only speak maybe 2 words, but it was her character that was hanging on every word from Caroline. And you can see it in her face. You can see it in her eyes. She's like, I don't know who this woman is, but this woman is wanting to say something,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
I was going to say that with Hannah, Caroline, in a way, again, trying not to sort of give away anything, but Caroline had not the easier job, but certainly had the meatier job, in terms of like, she understood everything that was going on. She had all the context, and Hannah almost had to forget all of the context in order to play the role honestly. And it became really important, part of our collaboration, with how the scene was blocked, And I always pictured, from the moment I'd written it, that they would sit together opposite each other at the table eventually. Eventually she's at ease enough that she would do that. And Hannah in rehearsal was like, I just don't know if I'd sit down. And so I was like, I'm not going to tell her no. I'm not going to say, no, I need you to sit down. I'm going to let it play. And if that's what feels natural to her, I'll let her do that and we'll see what that scene looks like. And then during the very first take, when we were first rolling, she sat down. And that wasn't rehearsed, and she was meant to just sort of be leaning on the end of the chair because that's what she said she felt that she would do. And I was like, okay, yeah, if that's what you feel, let's go with that. But in the first take, she sat down with her and played it like that, and she was like, it just felt right. And I think that's something about why it's so brilliant that these two, I was collaborating with these two, is that they just let things kind of unfold in a very natural way, and they were coming from how they felt rather than like the sort of the brain thinking about like the external, all the stuff that's going on in this film. They were moment to moment only working with how they felt about it.
Yeah, I want to bring up the camera shot
Mm-hmm.
where Hannah is in the back getting the box of umbrellas. The camera is showing the stainless steel wall with the view to the back of the counter, but it focuses on the older woman, which is Caroline. But she's also framed by the door behind her. So you see, you're seeing these angles, you're seeing the squares. And when I looked at it, and this may be way off base, but when I looked at it, was that a metaphor of looking into the past, but not yet knowing that it was a sign of things to come?
What a wonderful read that was. And I'm gonna take the advice of better filmmakers than I, and not say what I think the movie is doing, because it would discredit what you felt about it. And all I will say is that I loved hearing that, and I certainly have like my reasoning for why everything is shot the way it's shot. And what I love about filmmaking is that it's the role of a director, I think, is to ask questions of the audience, essentially, that I'm putting something there for you to kind of investigate. And I don't think there's any joy in me saying, well, actually, this is what it means. And I think actually, especially with something like this, which was intentionally meant to sort of bring up your own thoughts and ideas and feelings, it's wonderful to hear you describe the composition like that. To be honest, on a practical level, that scene was written in that way because when we saw that cafe, there was that hatch that square hatch that she's framed in, and me and my DOP were like, well, we've got to use that. Like, this frame within a frame, we have to use that. And so any of the meaning that you're sort of projecting onto it, I have different meaning, but it doesn't mean that your meaning is less meaningful.
No, I get it. I get it because even, I mean, you could even look at it as the stainless steel wall it's cold, but the inside of the cafe is warm. And you could interpret it as if someone was looking into someone's heart.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there's, the greatest thing about the audience is finding out what their idea, what their interpretation is of
Yep.
particular scenes. But there is I call it the third actor,
Uh-huh.
and
Yes.
it's the music score that
Oh my word.
consisted of an orchestral sound that provided a sense of mystery and importance, but a past and present connection between the two women. When I watch this film, I'm like, okay, if the music score wasn't there, would the film still have that same emotion? And I don't know what the real answer to that is, but that music score from beginning to end is literally off the chart. You got to tell me about the creation of it And because to me, it was the element that brought synergy to every part of this film.
Well, thank you. The composer is Benjamin Squires, and we've been working together for about 10 years, maybe just over actually. He's with my DOP, one of my closest collaborators. I've worked with him on absolutely everything that I've done. Um, and I'm lucky enough that he will just work with he's just somebody who will work with me without considering like, oh, how much is it going to pay me, or what, he's that kind of collaborator where like we're just kind of a team. So when I told him the idea of this film, I didn't even have a script yet. I just was on the phone to him and I told him basically what you see in some variation. This is what the story is. This is the relationship of the characters. This is the genre. We talked about references together. And actually, what I was doing when I was writing it is that I got some actors together in a room and I told each of them the story, and then I had them play it out just so I could see how it might play with just two actors doing it, just to give me some inspiration. And when I came out of one of those sessions, I had a text from Ben, and it was just like, "Got a surprise for you," and he had written the theme for the film and basically a suite of music. It was like 3 minutes long or something like that, and that helped me through every part of the process. Like I was writing the script with that in my headphones, and on set sometimes I would have that on for certain moments, like for the opening shot I was listening to it. It really just helps set the tone and the atmosphere and keep me kind of on track with like even the rhythm of the film. And I do agree with you actually that I don't know if it would work. Like Ben, to be honest with you, is one of those composers that's like, I want to do as little music as possible. When he doesn't have to put music in, he doesn't want to. He'd rather not do that. And I had to convince him to put more music into this because I told him that my intention was for it to feel quite dreamy and for it to feel kind of unreal and all those different kind of feelings, and not for it to feel as like realistic and present as it could feel without that music. It feels more ethereal because of his music, and I wanted that.
Yeah, it's not a song. It's this, it's an audio emotion in this film. And I kept listening to it because I was like, it's not overcomplicated. It's really quite simple,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the tone that makes you focus on the two characters, the setting, the cafe. And I mean, sometimes I would just start the film over just so I could hear it come in. And
Yeah.
and you know, and but but then there was another element. And I hope people really noticed the other element because the music score along with the rain
Mm-hmm.
provided a feeling of focus to the story. But when I kept looking, now there's this shot of Caroline. They're both sitting at the cafe table, and she's in that moment where where the depth of the story is being told by her. So I'm looking at the shot and I'm like, so then I look right behind her and you see the rain coming down upon the glass of the cafe. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what? That's like silent tears of the past. That's how I looked at it.
That that I mean, again, wonderful, and I will never tire of hearing you describe this film to me. Honestly, it is quite wonderful. Um, that shot, I remember because of what I told you earlier with how we had to move quite fast when we were making this for one reason or another. There wasn't much time sometimes for me to enjoy the shots as they were happening. I wasn't like fully taking in what we were doing every time we set up. I was like, yep, that's what I had in mind. Let's go. Whereas that shot of Caroline that you're referring to, that close up of her especially, when that was set up, I looked at the monitor and I went, that was what was in my head. Like there it is, and it's alive now. So yeah, it's there's many interesting things that different elements like that can bring to the story of it. Like I do believe that like when you know people were talking to me, like the producers and stuff were talking to me originally about like, well, if we make it and we don't have enough money, do you think we could do it without the rain? And I was like, no, the rain is as important to the story as anything. It has to be for a multitude of reasons. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
I agree with you that, and I just want to shout out as well that my sound designer, Dan Pugsley, he has done a magical job with this, and I'm a filmmaker who really pays attention to sound, and I think it's probably about 60% of the film actually it is in the emotion of it, like you're talking about with the music and stuff, but also the way that the sound design is done, even on a technical level, the way that he had to sort of mix in what wasn't perfect recording, because we obviously had hums and rain pattering outside that he needed to try and mix in with other sounds and whatever, but also just how he's controlling the emotion of the film as well in the sound design. The when it is quiet and when it's brought back in again, and when there's thunder to emphasize certain moments, like all that stuff is beautifully done by him.
You know, when you take the music score and you take the rain, one doesn't overpower the other.
Yeah.
And when I watched this film, people like me, you're wondering if you're ever going to see a film that you could really just use the word perfection. I've only been able to use that word once, but I get to use it twice. Because the second time around, when I look at a film from beginning to end, there isn't an element in this film that it's not off, it's not done incorrectly. This is a film that if a filmmaker needs a bar to reach, or a bar that they could try to get to, and to understand the art of filmmaking, this is that film.
How am I supposed to respond to that?
Any way you want.
Thank you. That, I mean, crazy, crazy. Just to, it's very satisfying and gratifying, and yeah, I just go back to thinking about me sort of wrestling with the idea in my head and wondering if it was good enough and if anyone would care. And now I'm sitting with you, you know, you're halfway across the world, you've experienced this thing that I chose to make, and you feel that way about it. There aren't really any words in the English language, or maybe any language, to describe how that feels. It's yeah, I'm very thankful that you responded to it the way you have. I'm really pleased.
Well, you're more than welcome, and I've seen films to where that made me cry. I've seen films where I am just so awe, and then they freaking mess it up at the end. And,
Well,
and
that's the ending, isn't it? The ending is the important part.
yeah, but here's the thing that and like you and I have done so well not to give anything away in this film, and I'm
I
not going to
think
give it
you
away
have.
now. So, but that
Mm-hmm.
one line in the film, Caroline is standing there about to leave, and Hannah's on the other side of the counter. That line, it when I first saw it, first heard it, I was like, "Oh my!" And then there's that pause. There's that pause from Caroline, and then you're like, "Oh." But when I went back to rewatch it a few times, I was like, that line has two meanings. It was an arrow into my heart that solidified my love for filmmaking.
Wow.
And you got to tell me, without
Mm-hmm.
us giving it away, you got to
Mm-hmm.
tell me how you directed that scene.
So that was one of the latest additions in the script, actually. I remember just feeling like there needs to be a payoff. There needs to be this like final, because that interaction that you're describing, I don't mind saying it this way because this is not what's in the film. Hannah said, "Nice to meet you," and then in a sort of meaningful way, Caroline's character would say, "You too." And I was like, actually, if you're expecting her to say that and she doesn't say that, and she there and says something much grander, uh, then you're going to be caught off guard. And I love the way that Caroline delivers that line. Firstly, because of the kind of film that it is, she says it in such a way where it's not clear if she's saying you are or you were. And you can't hear, if you listen to one, you'll hear the other and vice versa. Like, I think that is just a lightning in the bottle magic moment that when I was listening to her deliver that, I was like, I can't believe that this is, I can't tell which is which. And I wrote it. And the way we shot it, it's all of them really is completely from Hannah's character Ellie's perspective. So I didn't want to make that moment. I didn't want to break the language of that moment, and I think that the instinct is to maybe go in for this quite romantic close up for that moment, for that big last line. But actually, what happens is it's in this quite wide shot from behind Hannah's head, and then the big close up is actually on Hannah for her reaction, because it's all supposed to be from, like, we're supposed to be with her and meeting this person with Ellie. So I resisted basically the urge to go in close or to push in or any of that stuff, and just make it feel like the shot wasn't prepared for that moment either. So it sneaks up on everybody, the audience, on Hannah's character Ellie, and on the camera work. The camera work wasn't expecting that moment to happen within it either. So that's what kind of felt important to me and Kieran when we were sort of shot listing it and designing it. And also just, using the environment that we had and trying to like give it as much variety as possible, and to not feel like we were repeating ourselves or repeating shots, blah, blah, blah. So there's, as much of a technical decision as it was also mainly for me to feel like this shot wasn't meant for this moment, really. Like, you didn't know this was going to happen in this shot, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, this is when you put the camera behind Hannah,
Mm-hmm.
you made the audience receive what Caroline said. And that, I mean, it's like the Jerry Maguire moment. You had me at hello.
Mm-hmm. It is
And
quite like that. It is
it,
quite like that moment.
it is, but it's more, gosh, this is the film that, well, even for you, it leaves you to the point of being speechless because you don't know how to define, because it's so profound. There is that scene alone, that one line, it's mystery, it's powerful, it's endearing, it's love. But when you receive it, you're like, what do I do with that? And
Exactly.
you know what I mean? What do I
Yeah.
do with that?
Yeah. Exactly.
So boy, wow, the second time around. Okay, you got to tell me, you were an official selection at Holly Shorts this year, but what have
Yes.
been the audience's reactions to the film thus far?
That has been very gratifying for reasons that I've explained during this conversation with how you've been describing it. I'll start by saying that it was wonderful to show it to my parents. They came to the screening that we had, and I've never seen, especially my dad, quite like it. Like it was kind of taking me back how overwhelmed he was with emotion about the film, and that's been lovely. And he was like describing it to me like, oh, it doesn't matter about this and this, it's just about this thing. Like he was like, it's about this core thing. And it was like he was uh telling me what my own film was about, which is wonderful. Like he was able to sort of cut to the chase and be like, this is what it's actually doing. And it was just a movie he'd seen in the cinema and responded to. And yeah. And then it's been lovely to hear the variety of opinions on what's going on, like how people feel about it, especially the ending. The I know that I've written the ending in a particular way for it to feel bittersweet, I suppose, in a way. But I think quite a lot of people choose to read it quite optimistically, and I think that's wonderful because it's kind of telling me that most people inherently want to be optimistic.
Yes, I will say I was left with that, but we're not going to say it here because
Hmm.
it would give it away.
You and I are
We
going to talk
have,
about this off
yeah,
camera.
yeah, we will. We have the feeling of optimism because of one scene in what was said, and I will just leave it at that.
Yeah,
Because, yeah,
I'm
and
equally
you,
as interested to hear what you feel about it as well, how
well,
you think about that ending as well,
well,
because that's been the thing that's been most interesting
it's,
to hear how people read it.
well, it solidifies the title.
Hmm.
Not everybody, no, I'm just going to shut up. No, you, yeah,
No, you're
you
doing very
have,
well. You're
you
doing
got
very
to see
well
it.
with not giving it
No,
away.
you and I are going to keep this as a secret. And the only way you're going to find out about it, ladies and gentlemen, is you're going to have to be sitting in the theater. This time you're going to have to be sitting in the theater at Holly Shorts, and you're going to have to understand, when you see it, you're going to be like Jack. You're going to be like me. You don't know what to say. And I had this funny thought, Jack, pop into my head that because I love this film so much that if you make it into the run for the Oscars, I can
Yeah.
literally see you having your name called, you're holding the statue, and the first words out of your mouth is, I don't know what to say.
If that happens for you, I will say that.
I think that will work. And ladies and gentlemen, the second time around is one of those films that once you see it, you want to watch it again. And the film left me completely speechless in so many ways. The film starts on a rainy night while closing a cafe. A waitress is confronted by a mysterious older woman. But that sense of mystery is carried throughout the film and never lets you go. Every element of this film fits perfectly together. The rain, the cafe, two people who have never met, a small yet intimate personal conversation that leaves the audience hanging on every word. Now, Jack casts his line and hooks the audience and reels them into each of the women's lives. Now, I don't want to give too much away here, but it's a cinematic experience that you have to see, feel, and experience. I see hundreds of short films every year, and there are usually less than 5 films that capture me that I will never forget. The second time around is one of those films, and it's definitely in my top 5 this year. I could say it could be number 1, but I got a lot of friends in the film industry, so I'm trying not to be too biased, but this is a film, as I said before, I've only used the word perfection once, but I get to say it again. And I've seen this film so many times, I get the same sense of wonder and awe every time I watch it. So is the second time around a perfect film? Well, from a filmmaking point of view, and from every point of view, I think it is. So make sure if you are attending Holly Shorts that you see this film. And if you're not there, well, be sure to see it at whatever film festival it appears at. And look, I speak from the heart, and I would suggest many of my Academy member friends seek this film out and watch it and let me know if you feel the same way I do about it. And for some of you, well, I may have to slide you the private screener to know ahead of time. So, Jack, I want to thank you so much for sharing one of the most incredible cinematic works of art with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and you can listen to us on your way to work on Spotify, iTunes, and Audible, and many more. And, well, you're either going to see me at the movies or on the red carpet.